I joined, it's kind of a family tradition for me. My great-grandfather was in World War I, my grandfather was in World War II, both Marines. My older brother joined, it skipped a generation with my dad, but my older brother joined the Marines, and then, you know, I was just kind of next in line. I'd kind of planned on it from the time I was a freshman in high school. Just planned on going to the Marine Corps, you know, and I was planning on, you know, I was thinking about making a career out of it. Yeah, I remember my first day at boot camp.
Was it pretty chaotic, putting your feet on the yellow?
Putting my feet on the yellow footprints and, you know, not knowing what's going on, and you're already exhausted. You just have to stay up longer. That's one thing I write about. Tell you what, out there in Iraq, we went long periods without sleep. Didn't know what I was getting into. I was such a young kid. I look back on it now, you know, I had some writings from when I was in high school I just looked at the other day when I was looking for all these pictures. And now it's like, I was such a kid. I had no idea, you know. I went to Marine combat training in Camp Pendleton, and from there I went to 29 Palms. I remember sitting at home when 9/11 happened and we got the call that afternoon, you know, pack your stuff. I left in February of 2003.
Right when it started, huh?
Yeah, we went to Matilda. I was in Camp Matilda in Kuwait. We were there for a couple of weeks, just training, prepping, and then moved up to within, I was just south of Safwan Hill. When you're there, you know, initially you're, you know, let me get into the fight, you know, I want to get into the fight. And then, you know, you quickly learn that you didn't necessarily want to be in the fight. We crossed the border first day. It was the middle of the night. We pulled through Safwan, the town of Safwan, and we were parked on the road the whole night. There was a tank cooking off down the road, and we kind of rested and did watch there. And next morning we woke up and had a explosion on the side of the road. Master Sergeant got hit. Yeah, that was the first casualty I saw. We went, it was the day after we got across the border, and kind of hits home about how prior to that, you know, you're kind of like you're that jaded little kid who's like, you know, hey, all right, gung-ho action movies, and then you cross that border and you realize, hey, I'm mortal. The biggest part was the fear. You hear the explosion, and then you're waiting on the attack that's coming right after that, pointing outboard and just waiting. We knew it wasn't an RPG because we didn't see a trail, so we knew it was some sort of explosion. We didn't know whether it was a mine or grenade or what it was. Most of the time, I didn't really know where I was. I mean, that was another scary part. You don't even know where you are. There was a lot of stuff. I mean, we got into some skirmishes. I had met a couple who were driving along. They have like these canals dug in the road or drainage ditches, I don't know. And then on the other side, there's this high sand berm. And then they were driving up on top of that sand berm, and the sand gave way and their Humvee flipped and they ended up in that river, and apparently they must have been unconscious or weren't able to get out or whatever and died in there. Just some guys I'd met earlier. I hadn't known them long, but that was pretty rough. The road up to Baghdad the flies were so thick that I had spilt a little bit of cocoa powder from one of the MREs on my seat. We got out to stop. because I mean, driving, it was constant driving. I mean, we were on the road 8, 10, 16 hours a day at least, you know. We'd stop for a little bit, stay for a day, pack back up and leave. So I had dropped that stuff on the seat, and when I got out, I came back to it, and it was just, my whole seat was flies because of all the dead bodies that were around. It was, for a minute, we thought we were going to have to go out and bury him. I think one of the hardest parts was when we actually got up into Baghdad, and we actually saw just lines of dead bodies just strewn along the whole road. Guys in the middle of the road, people who'd been run over. There was some of them had been burned by like napalm, it looked like. There was a bus with a woman hanging out the back of it, had been blown to pieces. I think that's probably, some of the hardest stuff to see. Because prior to that, I don't know if on the pictures, you know, I'd met some of them. They, you know, down in the South, they were some of the nicest people. I mean, brought us breakfast in the morning when I was out on a retrans site one time, and then just to think that, you know, that's them sitting out there, that was kind of rough. In combat, it's training. I mean, because what happens, I realized what happened was I didn't even know what was going on until afterward. I remember I pieced together afterward, and that's when everything hits you. I mean, the adrenaline comes down and you just start bawling. I've done that one. But just rolled out the side, put my machine gun out there, and, you know, looked for anybody that was, you know, coming at me or firing or anything like that. I remember, you know, doing that, but actually thinking about it, I don't think I actually thought about it once. After a while, it wears on you, and I finally broke down and wrote that last letter home. You know, they told us to write our last letter home to send just in case. And I said, you know, I'm not going to do that. You write that last letter home, you know, you're gonna be going home that way. And finally, you know, after a while, it was right after we actually caught some mortar fire we had stayed in a Republican Guard base up in Baghdad. We caught some mortar fire in the base, and you know, I just finally broke down and wrote that, tears strewn all over the paper. I kept it on my person. Obviously, it would be mailed posthumously. So I just tried to think of all the stuff that I wanted to tell. I got 3 brothers and 3 sisters, and I tried to think of all the stuff that I wanted to tell them, you know, last words of advice or something like that. And my girlfriend, who later on became my wife, you know, just wanted to let her know how much I cared and loved for her. Yeah, that one was rough. Most of the time, we just tried to make everything seem as home as possible, as home-like as possible, if that makes sense. The guys from the unit I was attached to always wanted, you know, to be back in California, so they set up on their tracks, you know, the Hotel California thing, and we'd often talk about, you know, we did the stupid thing. We talk about plans and girlfriends and wives back home. You know, we're gonna be the next one shot, right? If you watch those movies, you know, it definitely helps to make sure that you just keep talking about it and you keep remembering life at home. You know, that's the only thing that's going to keep you grounded and keep you sane. Always keep a vigilant eye, obviously, but especially make sure, you know, you have to make sure just to keep saying, you got to remember home. You got to remember your family, you know. a lot of us don't realize it isn't just the Marine that goes to war. You know, his family goes with him. And, you know, it's really hard. Our military guys do sacrifice a lot. And there are a lot of, you know, divorces and a lot of stuff like that happens because they're being deployed so often. There's a lot of, they sacrifice a whole bunch, you know, especially those guys that go back 2 and 3 times. And they miss birthdays. A buddy of mine had a kid when he came back, or had a kid before he left. She was a baby when he came back. You know, she was walking, didn't even know him. And, you know, you lose stuff like that. You'll miss birthdays. You miss, you know, anniversaries. And when we flew in, it was just flew in, went through the medical screening process. It wasn't until we got, we had a nice welcome home ceremony when we got back to Indianapolis. And that's where I proposed with my wife there. And yeah, we were all in formation. And I had the gunny call her out, and I came out and proposed to her and spent all my money that I had made in the war to buy her that engagement ring. It's a nice engagement ring. You know, I came home, tried to start back to the regular life. I had had a factory job before then, went back to that factory job, and was just kind of carrying on. And I noticed, you know, I didn't want any. I'd get nightmares. First day back, I'd get nightmares, and I didn't. Used to be, I'd sleep, you know, all cuddled up on my wife, and then after that, it was, I kind of wanted to be in my own space. And if, you know, somebody bumps me or something like that, I always wake up or jolt or something. Unless, of course, and that's why I took to drinking. You know, I wanted to sleep through the night, and I didn't want any more dreams like that. And then, you know, then finally, after all that time, my fiance was threatening to leave me, and, you know, she said, you need to go get help. And she's been really instrumental in helping me through this. Without her, I don't know where I'd be. My wife seems to say that, you know, well, and I pretty much agree with her. I came home, part of my disability is post-traumatic stress disorder. I still get nightmares and everything. And see, before then, I was like the happy-go-lucky, nothing bothered me type of guy. Since I got back, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, you either start to care less, you know, about some things. I noticed coming back, you know, I got less of a care for material goods, you know. Doesn't matter to me. I drive a car that's paid off. As long as it gets me to and from, I don't care. But, you know, it does cause issues. I get angry more often. In my little bouts with depression, you know, I got to the point where I was suicidal. And the one thing that kept me going was suicide's one of the most selfish acts in the world. And I said I couldn't do that to my family. Couldn't do it to my brothers and my sisters, and I couldn't do it to my wife, my daughter. Just couldn't do it. So if it wasn't for them, you know, I really wouldn't have anything to live for. So prior to the war, I never had a bout with depression. And then after the war, during and after the war is when it's like slammed me. And you know, I wasn't myself. I wasn't the guy before the war. And I took to drinking a lot. You know, I'd come home from work and drink a 6 or 12 pack of beer, go pass out in the bedroom, and it got to the point where my wife, who was my fiance at the time, was planning on leaving me, and then I got a DUI, and I decided it's time, and it got me. It could have gotten really, really bad before it ever got better if I didn't get help right away. My problem was I would just drink. I was self-medicating, and it finally got me on some antidepressants, and they got me for anxiety, the Xanax and all that stuff, and and then talking through a lot of it with the therapist over there, helped me out. You still have your problems with, you always have the nightmares and the, God damn it, why is my life like this? And why shit just seemed to pile on, and you gotta try and get away from that. You gotta try and. I think the one thing that changed my perspective the most, finally, I realized, when it's your time, it's your time. Because a buddy of mine, good buddy of mine at my unit, we came home. The weekend after we come home, he dies in a motorcycle accident. And I was like, just crazy that he makes it all the way through that fucking shithole, that hell, only to come back and die, left behind a beautiful fiance. Yeah, that was rough. That was really rough. That was probably one of the worst things that happened coming back. But his uniform's hanging in the Vermilion County Veterans Museum. You want to go out there and check that out? He's out there. And yeah, that was rough. That was really rough. And I really am sad that I didn't make it out to his memorial service. But I went over there thinking that I was hard as nails, and what I didn't realize was I'm really empathetic, and I'm really sympathetic, and when you're surrounded by all that death and all that, you can feel it. I could feel it in my soul, and it still haunts me, and that's what really. I think that's what really causes a lot of my issues and problems. A lot of my depression. I think because I have to look at it on the one hand as we took a guy who was slaughtering thousands of innocent civilians all the time, and weigh that with, well, it cost a lot of lives to get him out of there though too. So it's one of those catch-22 type of things. I hope my attempts weren't futile. That's one thing. Because I really went there and I really wanted them to have the kind of freedoms that I have. That was if I had to sacrifice my youth and my happiness for something, at least it should be for a good cause, right? I would, just kind of my personality anyways, I've often said I'd join the Marine Corps so that somebody else's kid wouldn't have to. So, yeah, I'd do it again. Do I want to go back again? Hell no. I heard one gunny say one time that my country's not you. My country's not you. My country is my family, my friends, my mom, my dad, my wife, and my children. And those are the people who I fight for. And that hit me. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, yeah, that's your country. It's your family and your friends, and it's the people you love. And that's the people who we fight to defend, and that the flag represents those people to me, you know, something worth fighting for.